Bad Life Podcast! You are listening to the Bad Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Hello. Oh, my voice went funny.
It's a good start, isn't it? It's all that
start.
Christmas singing, Pete.
It's all, it's all those carols. Hello and welcome to the Bad Life Podcast. I am Pete Stannard, your host, and I'm here with the Christmas Wizard of Rock himself, Mr. Adam West. Enough. Enough. I feel like I do that joke every episode.
You should do the joke every.
It's good. So how are you on this merry edition of Bad Life Podcast, episode 23, mate?
But to answer your question, yes, I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine, but we haven't got I haven't got 2 or 3 hours to tell you exactly what's been going on. I don't think the viewers want to hear my aches and pains, moans and groans. So
your old man moaning.
Yeah. So let's just get on with the show.
Anyway, do you want to hear about what we're going to talk about on this episode? We are going to talk about, it's something that's kind of dear to us because we are slap bang in this genre of music. Has metal music lost its sense of community? Now, this is kind of inspired by Rick Beato. If you don't know who Rick Beato is, he is a music producer and I suppose he's considered now to be an influencer because he has millions upon millions of people watching his YouTube channel, if that makes sense.
Yes, he's rather popular.
He's very popular. He made a video basically saying, where have all the metalheads gone? In this video, he compared current, or as he described them, contemporary bands. So bands like Bring Me the Horizon, Ghost, Pierce the Veil, Spiritbox, Architects, that sort of thing.
Right.
You know, so very kind of now bands. He looked at the monthly listeners for these bands, and they ranged from 13.6 million, that's Bring Me the Horizon, all the way down to 2.2 million for Gojira. I presume I'm pronouncing that right, as in the Japanese, at 2.2 million. So there's quite a big gap between them. He looked at those bands, and then he looked at what he called heritage band, or as I call them, kind of legacy bands. Linkin Park, Metallica, System of a Down, Limp Bizkit, Alice in Chains, going all the way back to Black Sabbath, the godfathers of metal. These bands' monthly listeners ranged from 53.7 million for Linkin Park, right the way down to 1.1 million for Anthrax and Testament. So again, we've got such a huge range there. I kind of see where he's coming from when you compare, Bring Me the Horizon having 13.6 and Linkin Park having 53.7. That's like, 40 million variants, isn't it? So it's quite a big jump between the two.
There's a big jump.
So he's kind of analysing that and kind of asking the question is like, why aren't those other 40 million people listening to Bring Me the Horizon? Which I think is a valid question, I suppose. Why do you think that is at this stage, my friend?
Why is there such a gap? Why are people listening to some of the heritage bands more, basically, right?
Yeah.
Right, they get in a lot of listens. I think a lot of it has to do when bands, artists or musicians write any kind of music. If you don't start the song off with something quite memorable, and it's either a lick, a riff, or a type of melody, you kind of, the audience is sort of wavering around in the middle, right? So with me, if somebody puts a track on, let's use obviously Metallica's Enter Sandman, right? As soon as you hear that, you kind of like instantly there's a connection in here to the music. You're like, well, this sounds like it's got potential. You're already hooked because it's that initial riff. And I think what some bands do, I think what they're lacking in the modern ones today is that they don't think or write like that anymore. I think what they're doing is they're really copying and pasting maybe what other bands have done, putting their own stint on it, but it ends up being a little bit watered down. I think somebody referenced maybe Avenged Sevenfold with basically a faster version of Iron Maiden, and I'm like, I don't really listen to much Maiden or even Avenged Sevenfold. I think that would be fair to say, since the person who was telling me this was a big fan on both of them. So I was like, okay, are any new bands today really knocking out any kind of riffs or songs that really pull you in? The 90s, really, there was a massive turning point in the 90s for metal. There's all those bands you've mentioned there, they all in the 90s, they all released class A albums, and they all have memorable songs, riffs. I mean, it's just like, wow, especially System of a Down. I mean, even if you're not a fan, you would have heard Toxicity, Chop Suey, and it's the way it starts, the way it gets people in. It's the melody breakdown, and the Sandman. And I just think that nobody's writing like that anymore. And if they are, it's not as good as it was, and maybe it never will be, because we're just really reaching that precipice of like, well, that's not the case for everybody. You do get some bands occasionally. They're not as prolific as they used to be in the 90s, but occasionally one or two sip through. Now, I hate to say this, right, because it sounds like a cheap plug, but when we're writing, all three of us are like, yes, there's a connection to the riff, the melody of the song, what starts it off, and the only way to test it is to throw it into the audience and see whether or not they resonate with that. And our second album, Material, has really been received quite well. Yeah. And we're often there going, is it that bit in the song? Is it the way it opens? And I think it's a combination of that. Like, I just don't see, like, even Megadeth done it. They've done a few albums in the past where they started off with solo, and I'm like, okay, it's great, but there's nothing really memorable in that solo, unless you reference what they did, say, in Peace Out But Who's By, and some of the solos there. They're quite memorable, even Euthanasia. So, and even the Black Album, where you've got My Friend of Misery, The God That Failed. There's memorable leads in there, right? They're not frantic. They're memorable melody leads. And I just think when bands are playing, it's like when you see them now, everything's and you're like, okay, it's great, it's technical, and it's brilliant. Does it really work? Does it really pull you in? Is there anything there that really cements itself in your psyche that goes, that's amazing? That's a bit long-winded.
I've always kind of referenced that to, as a guitarist, I always call it guitar wanking. You got a guitarist here, and I find it's impressive for guitarists to look at, and and they kind of the Steve Vais of the world. I mean, it's a very kind of subset of people that will sit down and enjoy that. But if you're trying to bring your music to the masses, I can see how that gets boring for people very, very quickly, because it just becomes a bunch of notes rather than it having that kind of melodic kind of feel to it. Does the technical stuff actually just get in the way of making great music?
I think it can do, especially when it's somebody saying, look, I can play technical fast solo, and you're like, okay. What do you want me to say? It's like,
but that's not to say that technical stuff can't be. Because I mean, you look at someone like Eddie Van Halen. He obviously connected with very many people. Even Slash and Richie Sambora. They're I'm all right. You're going from a range of shredders, as it were, but they're their fret work and their finger work and stuff is quite technical. I suppose like the counter argument to that, I suppose, would be, well, what shouldn't you be making music for the sake of your art, rather than whether people like it or not? That's
you should do it for you.
Kind of irrelevant, yeah.
Rick Rubin has said that. You should just don't worry about anybody else. Just write it for you. It's
write
like,
for you, yeah. I always say write for you, but produce for your audience, sort of thing.
Maybe that's it, Pete. Maybe people are not writing for themselves. They're writing for the audience because they like what they previously heard from another band. They're like, oh, let's do that. And you're like, yeah, but that band over there is doing something similar.
Yeah, I think possibly we're touching on it a little bit more. Is that a lot of these bands are just kind of producing stuff that's already been done. And it's like, there's no headspace between. Metallica have already done that. I'm not really producing anything new here.
I just don't think people write from the soul anymore.
It's kind of difficult to produce something that hasn't already been written as well, because there's only so much you can do with, all the chords and everything else.
I disagree, man. I often thought that, and I know we talked about it. I'm sat writing material sometimes, and I'm like, now here's where I stand with music, right? Out of all them bands on there, and the plethora of other bands that are about, I've only listened and really followed one of them, right? Okay. So then someone will turn around to me and go, oh, you got elements of Sabbath. I'm like, don't listen to them. And they're like, what? I'm like, don't listen to them. Not every day, and not even semi-regular. And they're like, whoa, there's a Sabbath influence. I'm like, I'll tell you what it is. It's a melody or a note or a tune that I've just played that just goes ping. I like that. I don't know why, but I like it. Let's develop on it. The other thing as well, I knew that if I'd sat down with listening to hundreds of bands as a teenager, I'd be absolutely awash with music, and I think sometimes that's half the problem,
I mean, I suppose going back to sort of the influences thing, like where you say someone's heard Black Sabbath in your music.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, I suppose, that if you were influenced by Metallica, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Metallica were influenced by Sabbath.
Yeah.
So maybe there's this whole, like you say, like a layering of influences now, that we're getting to a point where it's like,
oh yeah, so maybe that's why, because the layering of influences.
Yeah, because I'm influenced by this band, but that band that I'm influenced by was influenced by that band. So you've kind of got almost like a multi-generational set of influences now.
So maybe Pete, but what you just said there, that's really valid, right? So what if now, like, say, if you put up a chart, right, and you had at the top, there was only, say, like 10 bands, right, that were kind of...
so you had like Sabbath, Maiden,
right.
Judas Priest, like you say, Deep Purple, those kind of late 60s, early 70s sorts of bands,
Yeah, now you've...
top tier.
Exactly, and now you've got, in that second paragraph there, you've got all those bands that were influenced from those bands. They branched off, and instead of it being 10, it is now like 30 or 40. And so the further down you go, the more bands there are, the more watered down it gets, the more saturated it gets. Eventually, when you get to the bottom, it's just a sludge of... Because this is the strange thing, because Rick actually talks about it, I think, where we're at that point now where he's like... He made reference to, like, you had the 60s, and then he mentioned the 60s bands and music. He said then you had the 70s, the hippie movement and all that sort of stuff. Then the 80s, and he said you get the present day. He's like, what have we got? And I was listening and going, I don't know. What's the answer?
Yeah,
like,
I think we've touched on this, that there's no real musical movement in a previous episode. Where
exactly.
I think where we were talking about bands come up through the industry and they start at an independent level, and how that's kind of getting decimated. And there's no real kind of no one can actually pinpoint. So, like in the early 90s, you had like the grunge thing, you had hair metal in the 80s.
Exactly right.
Classic metal in the 70s, or start of metal in the 70s. And then you had like new metal and stuff in the early 2000s. So you got kind of your Linkin Parks and Limp Bizkits and
And even then, that's where it started to go downhill, because I'm like, what's new metal? Because there was
that's kind of a merge between hip hop and metal, and some other bands got clumped in there that I didn't quite understand, because I wouldn't say that System of a Down has any kind of hip hop element to them, or even like the Deftones, for example. Not a huge amount of, not like what Limp Bizkit were doing, or even like Korn, who is basically essentially the godfathers of new metal.
I bet the only good thing that came
rapping.
No, but I think what they did pull off. I liked Korn.
And I like Korn.
And I was just
I've seen them a few times. Yeah, they're great.
Something about them. I'm like, you guys were lucky. You got through that net, right? And a lot of bands didn't make it. They're still stuck there. And this is the thing. I think that was where we started to see music really start to tip off the edge. Because I remember the scene. I was just like, new metal. I'm like, that's a bit of a shite name, isn't it? New metal. I'm like, I mean, based on all the ones you just mentioned, like, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, let's see what we got. And I think it's basically been a gradual decline, because people, it's basically a watered down. We've got so watered down with music that we can't pigeonhole music today in a genre or anything. It's like, what is it today? And it's like, I don't know. What would you call it? Because it's angry, it's noisy, and it's very confusing, you know.
Yeah, and there seems to be so many subgenres now as well.
Oh, it does my nut in.
Just like maybe a younger person would be like, well, the metalcore's a thing. Like that would be their kind of way of categorizing it. But at the same point, I don't feel it's had the same sort of movement that sort of grunge did back in the day.
It's got a big movement, metalcore, right? Now, I'm not a lover of it. It annoys the pants off me. It's not because I'm old. It's because I think no matter who you are, if you really get down to the bare bones, it's all about the melody. Now, they would probably argue it and say there is melody in metalcore, and you're like, okay, so the melody in metalcore to me sounds a little forced and predictable, because if you don't, the rest of the song sounds like it does at the beginning and the end, which is throat screaming, and it's just a lot of noise, man. You can't filter it much, but then you get that break point. I'm like, oh, that's kind of pretty, and then it's like, I don't think it's executed very well, but it does have a big following, metalcore, like huge, because we're trying to get into gigs, and they're like, we do metalcore, and I'm like, oh god, not metalcore again. It's how many bands do you want doing metalcore, as an example? And then is the branch off of metalcore and deathcore, grindcore, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, oh, it's just like, well, what's the difference between metalcore and grindcore? It's like,
well, grimecore would have that kind of hip hop element from grime, I suppose. So it's like new metal, but with grime and metalcore, if that makes sense.
We're really clutching the straws, though, aren't we?
Yeah, because I think they're just looking for
something new.
They're trying to create their own movement, I think, in a way, and you can't really put them down for that, because that's what you want.
I don't want to sound disrespectful. They're excellent at the craft and what they do. It's frustrating because you've got so many doing the same thing, and so when you try to go see a band and a promoter puts on 5 axle metalcore, I'm like, you know that they're all going to be doing the same thing. Now you could argue that by saying, okay, so I'll put 5 metal bands on. I'm like, well, there's metal and then there's metal. When you start adding too much, like a painting, you can keep going back to it and adding bits, and eventually you'll end up destroying what you originally set out to do, and how good it looked. And I think sometimes music gets a bit like that. It's like, oh man, like what am I listening to here? What's it about? Like, you know,
going back to how these bands are trying to create a movement for themselves. If you're trying to create an individual movement, then you need to it needs to be branded, for want of a better way of putting it, sort of quote unquote. Then you're going to have to create a whole new kind of subgenre of it. Like when Nirvana first came about, grunge didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. You know, I've heard interviews with Dave Grohl, and he was like, we didn't call it grunge. I just called it metal music. There just wasn't a genre of grunge. It's only because other people named that stuff from Seattle grunge that it became grunge.
Do we need titles for every bit of music? Really, tag or a label? Identification purposes.
Some kind of categorization, yeah.
I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah. Well, if you throw a bit of music at me, I'll either say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't. So let's go, it's like, so instead of going, right, this is this subgenre, which is from this genre, I'm like, I don't need to know. Do I like the music? That's all I care about. If you've got to put into a category, fine. I've always struggled with that when it comes to people asking, so what do you sound like? I'm like, so we come up with our own title in the end, because I was like, I don't know. I don't know what we sound like, because I don't write with the idea of going, that sounds like a bit of grunge. It's like, I don't know. I don't care. I never really listened to grunge. I'm like, if I play a riff or something and it sounds great and somebody goes, well, it's very folky. It's like, okay. And? Do you like it? Yeah, great. Well, there we go. Let's move on.
So in a roundabout way, what you've done is you created your own subgenre. So you've done the very thing that you don't want to happen.
Brilliant. Cheers. Kid.
That's all right, mate.
I don't look at it like that. I mean,
no. And I perfectly understand where you're coming from, because even I get like, what genre are we in now? What's going on here? Sort of thing, well, there's so many of them.
It's kind of what we're sort of talking about, and I really don't know.
I think kind of going back to where everything has become, I think, multi-generational influenced. It's just become kind of confusing for listeners now, and it's just easier to go, okay, well, I'll just listen to Linkin Park if I'm into that kind of hip hop metal thing. Well, because I know it's a safe bet that I'm going to get something decent.
And not only that, it's a safe bet. I'm also going to remember what I listen to because there's something memorable in it. Maybe that's it with who we're talking about here. If people are actually going back to this sort of category of bands that we mentioned, right, with the billion streams, I'm like, well, that's got to tell you something, right? Without me or you sitting here berating certain genres, it's like if the stats and the figures tell us that people are not listening to modern music but going back, I'm like, well, that's what you should address, because that's how you get. That's how marketing's done, right? Well, we need to know where our clientele and our listeners are. Why is that? Why are people listening to more of this heritage bands? I'm like, that's why we're here to talk about it. Interesting, right? Because I mean, we're only just throwing our suggestions and thoughts in there, because even we don't know. So don't have a go at us.
No, all we can do is speculate. But that brings us like, do you want to know? Do you want to hear how many metal bands have 1 billion streams or more?
I do.
Okay. This is from Rick Beato. I'll link Rick Beato's video in the show notes and beneath this if you want to check it out for yourself. There are only 16 songs in the entirety of metal that have cracked the 1 billion mark.
Only 16?
Only 16, yeah. It's crazy, isn't it, when you think of it like that?
Wow, okay.
Let's go top to bottom, okay? You got Linkin Park's In the End, 2.8 billion.
That's my wife. She's always listening to that song. Oh. She's the reason why they're in the billion. I'm telling you now, mate. If you look at their profile page, it's like, In the End, Linkin Park. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's a very popular song. Then you've got Numb by the same band, obviously by Linkin Park, 2.5 billion. Then you got Metallica's Enter Sandman at 1.8. Then you got System of a Down's Chop Suey at 1.8. Yeah. Then Nothing Else Matters by Metallica at 1.5.
That's my wife again.
That's your wife again. And then Black Sabbath's Paranoid at 1.5.
See, I can't stand that song.
Along with Papa Roach's Last Resort. Then we go back to System of a Down with Toxicity at 1.3. Linkin Park's What I've Done and the Numb, the version that features Jay-Z at 1.2, and Faint by Linkin Park.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Then Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name at 1.1, along with Metallica's Master of the Puppets. Then Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff at 1.02 billion. Then we go back to Linkin Park with One Step Closer.
That's incredible.
And Slipknot's Duality. They've hit the billion mark. And that's it. So
wow. Linkin Park, man.
Linkin Park has literally, to put it in an Americanism, knocked it out the park. You see what I did there?
Oh, that's very good, man.
So they've got 5 out of the 16 songs
that
have cracked a billion. And they're all but one is off their first album.
Oh, that was done in the 90s, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, late 90s, yeah.
See, right? It was a pivotal point in musical history, man. In our,
it was.
Do you know what? I'm wondering, see, this has got to be like a 3-part podcast, this is, right? Because if you look at those numbers there, right? Now, you've got Linkin Park on the most. Is it because their music video adds to the listening content? Because look at System of a Down's, which one was it? Chop Suey?
Chop Suey
right.
Is their top one, yeah.
Now, is that the one where they got the camera going, swiveling around and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, now that's impressive, right? So I'm wondering whether or not the music video is what lends to the numbers being as high as they are. Because Numb, right, it is a catchy track. Not only is it catchy, right, melodic, melody-wise, chorusy, it's memorable. It's got all the things in it. It's a great song. Even I like it, right? But the video as well is quite good for it. And I'm like, I'm wondering if it's a case of that. What do you reckon?
Possibly. I mean, there's a lot of people saying that one of the big reasons that Smells Like Teen Spirit was such a popular song was because of the music video. It's just as much as the song itself. Like there's a whole kind of raft of elements. I mean, the song's got to be good. It's got to be well produced in the first place.
Yeah.
But once you add that element, especially when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out in 92 or late 91, that was kind of very early, well, not very early on, but it was early MTV days at that point. Out of the new bands, or the contemporary bands, as Rick Beato called them, there's only one song that even comes close to the billion mark, and that's Bring Me the Horizon's Can You Feel My Heart. I say only, but it's only cracked 700 million streams. Out of the other pool of bands, they're not even anywhere close to that, which kind of begs the question, like, why is there such a big gap? Rick thinks it's because kids just aren't picking up musical instruments like they used to, which I kind of agreed with at first. I thought,
and you thought, what does Rick know?
Yeah, what would Rick know? And I kind of went, maybe they're not, because like when I first picked up a guitar, it was because I loved music and I was kind of bored at home. I didn't particularly like watching TV and all this because there was nothing on. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do to occupy my time? So
what are you on about? There's nothing on. Your trash was on at like 3:30 in the morning. That's brilliant.
Yeah, but I weren't watching that when I was 14 years old. Sort of thing. But then I thought, well, if kids are sitting around and they're watching YouTube, then why aren't they learning? Because this is like a golden era of communication. Why aren't they picking up instruments and learning from YouTube?
Because, got an answer for that. Because the creator of the scrolling technique admitted that it's a dopamine rush and it's addictive.
You're giving an example of short form. If you're going to be looking for guitar teaching, it has to be long form. Anyway, it's going to be more than 5 minutes. It does,
but there's so many distractions on there. People are just like, I'm bored. What's on the...
I'm bored. What's on this sort of thing? Again, I'm not entirely sure I agree with Rick's viewpoint on whether or not kids are picking up, because you do see, I see a lot of young people even on the short form stuff, and they're ripping out Metallica stuff, guitar solos. You got like a 10-year-old kid just blazing away, sort of thing.
So they are doing it.
They are doing it. So I'm not entirely sure it's the instrument thing. I think it's more a case of, for some reason, newer bands just aren't connecting in a way that these heritage bands are, and still are to this day. Because you could say, oh, well, maybe it's because they've been around longer, but this is streaming numbers. So everyone's kind of hit it at the same time, because streaming's only been around for, 15 years. A band that was, popular in the 90s or even the 70s, why are they hitting the billion streams when a band like Bring Me the Horizon is only getting 700 million, sort of thing? You would have thought that if they're current, they should be far more popular than Black Sabbath. Really?
Maybe the old ones just are the best.
Maybe it goes back to what we were saying of it being, this layered, multi-generational influence thing, and it's kind of like, well, we've heard this before. I've heard this. I've heard my dad playing this in the car, which happened to be Linkin Park. That sort of thing. Obviously, in the end, by Linkin Park, because that seems to be the band or the song of choice.
It's jumping on what has already been done before and making it darker, meaner, and more aggressive. Maybe because it's where we are right now as people. Because if you look at society at the moment, like, everyone's angry and bitter. There's fighting, there's wars, there's racial tension, and so if people have a way to express themselves, it's either through protesting, writing, poetry, music. What do you think they're going to be singing about? They're not going to be singing about, the hippie era. Really, they're going to be singing about current trends and affairs that are affecting them, and they either do that through poetry or music, and so the music then basically becomes how the individuals are feeling. And I think current trends, it's loud, it's angry, it's technical, it's messed up, I think, for a lot of it. Do you agree on that one?
Yeah, I agree, but it's still not. It doesn't answer the question of why it's not connecting, because if it was, then it would be more popular, wouldn't it? Let's take that example of war, in the 60s. So you had, artists like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, would be considered anti-war, certainly anti-Vietnam at that time. They obviously had a driving connection with their fan base. I mean, especially if you look at Jimi Hendrix. I mean, he was only popular for a few years, and then sadly he passed away. At that time, made a political connection with a fan base, very much the youth. Bands today, they're clearly not connecting in the same way that those artists were. Maybe they're just too broad a perspective of, oh, well, everything's messed up, everything's up, so I'm just going to be angry and pissed off about it, rather than being like, I'm pissed off about, I don't know, the war in the Israel-Palestine thing, or the Ukraine-Russia thing, or how there's wealth inequality here in the UK or in the States or wherever, whatever political or geopolitical viewpoint they have. Maybe they're just not being brave enough to just call people out and say, look, this guy's a dick. He's doing bad things. He needs to be stopped, sort of thing.
Well, it can't we? Because there's so many laws now in place to prevent anybody from saying or doing anything.
Well, but again, they still had that in the 60s. This is why people like...
They didn't have data. They didn't have these data laws that are coming into effect now.
Well, they didn't, but they wouldn't have got it released. So, like, Mr. Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan is about a drug dealer. It's about dealing drugs and taking drugs. So, but it was very obvious within the lyrical content what he was speaking about. But because he didn't out and out say it, it couldn't be banned, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, there's ways around it, right?
Yeah, so there are ways of doing it, but I think those issues are still with us, but you just need to find a way around it, and maybe they're just not being clear enough within their messaging. But I also think that there's a raft of factors rather than trying to pin it down to one. And I've made a little list of what I think and I think we've covered most of these. Kids are just listening to their parents' music,
Yeah.
and they're kind of identifying more with that. Oversaturation is overwhelming for everyone.
Agreed.
Too many subgenres.
Agreed.
I think metal's become far too niche. But I also think there's a decline in musical education in schools that needs to be addressed.
That's an interesting one.
Going back to why kids aren't picking up instruments anymore. If my kids want to learn music at primary school, we've got to pay extra for it.
Well, that never used to be the case.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, well, it's probably because they're trying to destroy the arts. They don't want it, do they?
Yeah, well, they just don't have the money to do it anymore. This is the thing. And then there's the last one I put on here, which is a little bit kind of harsh, but it could be a reality of it, is that maybe kids just don't like metal. And I looked into this. While metal listeners on Spotify have a wide range, 18 to 44, the largest group of people listening to metal are 28 to 34-year-olds.
Yeah, I get those stats on mine as well.
So maybe that's the problem, is that a lot of these bands they're not connecting with anyone under the age of 30, there or thereabouts, for whatever reason.
Well, kids don't talk about what's going on in their minds anymore because they can't talk to their parents, which I think is quite sad. That's why you've got parents. I mean, not every parent is great, but, maybe we just don't know what bothers the younger generation these days that much. I know with mine, because they're in their 20s, what bothers them is safety in the future. Is kind of like two of the things that concerns them.
Yeah. So when you say safety, in what way?
In, say, going out maybe to a pub or nightclub, as a young girl or
so
a young
like
boy.
Physical safety, yeah. Okay. I'd like to say, I think there's just a myriad of factors here with this, and I think it's a very interesting debate to have, and it's one that people like you and I need to have, because we're music artists in this genre.
We're trying to understand it ourselves.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. Yeah, we've kind of grown up listening to the bands that are getting 1 billion streams at the end of the day. I'm not massively into the bigger, newer metal bands, to be honest. Some of it I don't particularly mind. Spiritbox, I think, are quite cool.
So I've never heard of Spiritbox.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're not going to answer in this episode, but it's food for thought, I feel. Yeah, well, so if our listeners could comment their thoughts on this, we would love to hear a different opinion.
Well,
or even if you just agree. Yeah, let's start a conversation about it. It's great. Yeah, what do you think? Why do you think there's such a gap between what would be the heritage bands and our contemporary bands? Is it purely down to one factor of maybe it's just oversaturation and there's just too much choice, so everyone just kind of reverts to something that they know? Something, maybe it's as simplistic as that, or is it a much more complex thing where everything from social implications right the way to people just don't really listen to metal music anymore, which is kind of a harsh reality, but if it's a reality, then it's a reality at the end of the day.
What is what is metal music?
What is metal music? Well, that's a whole other episode.
I want to do an episode on that next year. What is metal music?
What is metal? I wouldn't even know where to start. Bad Life Podcast!